I never imagined a simple evening jog could turn into a nightmare. It was a warm Friday night in late September, the sun setting and casting an orange glow over my quiet suburban neighborhood. I usually felt safe running through the winding streets, but that night, something felt off. As I laced up my sneakers, I noticed a man lingering at the end of my street. Leaning against a lamppost, he wore a dark hoodie that concealed his face. I dismissed my unease. Perhaps he was just waiting for a friend. I headed out, earbuds in, the familiar beat of my playlist drowning out the world. I took my usual route, past the park, down Elm Street, and looping back home. About a mile in, I realized the man had moved. He was now walking behind me, just far enough to be visible in my peripheral vision. My heartbeat quickened, and I picked up the pace, hoping to distance myself. "Hey," he called out, his voice piercing through my music. I hesitated, torn between ignoring him and acknowledging his presence. I chose silence and quickened my steps even more. "Are you in a hurry?" he taunted, his tone mocking. I glanced back, my stomach twisting. He had picked up his pace, closing the gap. "Leave me alone!" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The street was empty, and only my voice echoed in response. I turned down a side street, hoping to lose him. Panic set in as I realized I was entering an unfamiliar area. The houses were further apart, with darker corners that swallowed the fading light. I could hear his footsteps behind me, heavier now, almost predatory. "Where are you going?" he called again, his voice low and sinister. I glanced back, and my heart sank. He was closer. Too close for comfort. "Just leave me alone," I said, my voice trembling. Adrenaline coursed through me, urging me to run faster. Suddenly, I spotted a narrow alleyway to my right. It was a risky move, but I ducked into it, hoping to lose him. The alley was dimly lit and littered with trash bins. I pressed myself against the cold brick wall, straining to hear his footsteps. For a moment, silence enveloped me, but then I heard him, his footsteps slowing as he approached the alley's entrance. "Where did you go?" he called again, feigning innocence. My blood ran cold. He was too close. I had to escape. I peeked around the corner, and my heart dropped. He stood at the mouth of the alley, his face partially obscured by the hood, but with a smirk that sent chills down my spine. "Come on! I just want to talk!" I couldn't breathe. I waited, heart racing, hoping he would lose interest. But he stepped further into the alley, and panic surged within me. I turned and sprinted deeper into the dimness, my lungs burning. I could hear his footsteps gaining on me. Ahead, I spotted a gate leading to a small yard. I threw myself against it, adrenaline fueling my desperate escape. The gate creaked open, and I stumbled into the yard, eyes darting for an exit. As I crossed the yard, I noticed an open door at the back of the house. Without thinking, I rushed toward it and slipped inside, locking the door behind me. I stood there, breathless, listening for any sign of him. Seconds felt like hours as I pressed my back against the door, heart pounding. I listened intently, waiting for footsteps or that sinister voice. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I heard him call out again, frustration in his tone. "You can't hide forever!" Every second felt like a countdown to disaster. When I finally mustered the courage to peek out the window, he was gone. I leaned against the wall trembling, a wave of relief washing over me. But fear lingered. I wouldn't feel safe until I got home. I made my way back to the front door and slipped out, heart racing as I retraced my steps, vigilant for any moving shadow. And when I finally reached my street, I felt a mix of relief and lingering dread. I don't know who that man was or what his intentions were, but I'll never forget that night. It's hard to shake the feeling that danger can lurk in the most familiar places. Let's not meet again. I was walking home from work late one Friday night, around 11 p.m. My shift at the diner had dragged on longer than usual, and the streets were mostly empty as I made my way through the dimly lit neighborhood. The air was crisp, and my breath came out in little puffs as I hurried along, clutching my jacket tighter around me. I always felt uneasy walking alone at this hour, but I was too exhausted to call a cab. As I turned onto a quieter street, I noticed a figure leaning against the lamppost about a block ahead. He looked to be in his mid-30s with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard, wearing a dark hoodie that concealed most of his face. My stomach twisted. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, it was late and I was tired. I quickened my pace, eyes glued to the ground, hoping to pass without incident. But as I approached, he pushed himself off the post and took a few steps toward me. I glanced up, forcing a tight smile. "Hey there," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You're out pretty late, huh?" "Just heading home," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I tried to keep walking, but he stepped into my path. "Mind if I walk with you? It's dangerous out here," he said, his smile unnerving. Fear washed over me. "No, that's okay. I'm fine on my own." He chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "I get it, but it's safer in numbers. You never know who might be lurking around." I glanced around, shadows stretching ominously, the street growing eerily silent. "Really? I'm fine," I insisted, my heart pounding. "Why don't you just let me walk with you? What's your name?" he asked, stepping closer. His eyes were locked on the mine, and I felt trapped. I really need to get going. My parents are waiting for me," I stammered, hoping to deflect him. "Parents?" he repeated, his tone shifting to something more menacing. "You're too old for that. How about we just chat a bit? I could use some company." I was desperate now. I glanced at my phone, hoping for salvation. "I really have to go," I said, backing away slowly. He frowned, stepping forward again. "You think I'm some kind of creep? I just want to talk." "You're not scared of me, are you?" "I'm not scared," I lied, my pulse racing. "I just need to—" Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a couple walking my way, their laughter echoing in the silence. I seized the moment. "Look, there's my friends!" I shouted frantically. The man's demeanor shifted, eyes narrowing. "You don't need them," he said, voice dropping. "Just come with me." "No!" I shouted, adrenaline surging. I turned and sprinted, not looking back. I could hear him cursing behind me, his footsteps pounding on the pavement. I ran until my lungs burned, darting into a nearby alley. I pressed myself against the cold brick wall, willing my heart to slow. I could hear him nearing, his voice growing louder as he called out for me, tauntingly calm. "Come on, you're just making this harder for yourself." I held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me. After what felt like an eternity, his footsteps faded and I dared to peek around the corner. The street was empty, but fear still gripped me. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment building, locking the door behind me. That night, I lay awake, the shadows of my room feeling like they were closing in around me. The encounter replayed in my mind, fear settling deep within me like a stone. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, waiting. So, to that man in the hoodie who tried to trap me in the dark, let's not meet again. It was around 10 p.m. when I left the cafe after a late study session. The streets of my small college town were usually quiet, but tonight felt different. A chill ran down my spine as I walked along the dimly lit sidewalk, my backpack slung over one shoulder, the weight of my textbooks oddly comforting. I was only a few blocks from my apartment, but as I turned the corner, the silence felt heavy. I spotted a figure under a flickering streetlight. Dressed in a worn hoodie and jeans, he had his hands deep in his pockets. At first I thought he was waiting for someone, but as I approached, I realized he was staring right at me. My heart raced, and I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the unease creeping in. "Hey, you!" I hesitated, then looked back. "Yeah? Do you have the time?" His voice was casual, but there was an unsettling edge to it. I glanced at my phone, 10:12 p.m., and held it up. "It's 10:12 p.m., I said, my voice shaky. "Thanks." He stepped closer, and I could see his dark, intense eyes. "You go to the university?" "Yeah," I replied, my throat tightening. "Nice. I'm a junior too. What's your major?" He took another step toward me. I felt trapped.
English. Cool. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've seen you around. You and your friends, you're always at that cafe. Hard to miss. My stomach dropped. Yeah, I guess so. Mind if I walk with you? He cocked his head, a glint of something unsettling in his gaze. No, I really need to get home, I stammered, backing away. Aw, come on. It's late. You shouldn't be walking alone. He stepped closer, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I turned and quickened my pace, my heart racing. Wait! He shouted. I heard his footsteps quickening behind me as I sprinted down the street. The ambient noise of the town faded. All I could hear was my breath and the pounding of my heart. Hey, I'm just trying to talk, he yelled. I glanced back and saw his silhouette getting closer, his face twisted in anger or maybe desperation. I rounded a corner, hoping to lose him in the maze of streets. My mind raced as I thought of nearby places to hide. A small convenience store loomed ahead, its neon sign flickering. I bolted toward it, praying they were still open. The door swung open with a jingle, and I rushed inside. The clerk, a middle-aged man with glasses, looked up, startled. I glanced back through the glass door, and to my horror, I saw the man stop outside, peering in. My breath caught. What's wrong? The clerk asked, his expression hardening. There's someone, I struggled to explain, glancing between the man outside and the clerk. He's been following me. The clerk nodded, his expression hardening. Stay behind the counter. I pressed against the wall, trying to remain unnoticed. My heart raced as I watched the man fidget outside, scanning the store, deciding whether to enter. Just wait a moment, the clerk said, his voice low. I could see he was reaching for something beneath the counter. As the man finally turned to leave, I felt a rush of relief, but it was short-lived. He shot one last glare at the door before vanishing into the shadows. I didn't move for a long minute, processing what had just happened. Are you okay? The clerk asked as I took a shaky breath. Yeah, I think so. Thank you. My voice was barely a whisper. After a few more minutes, I finally left the store, the clerk giving me a nod of reassurance. I hurried home, every shadow feeling like it hid something sinister. Once safely inside my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. The encounter replayed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Weeks have passed, and I still look over my shoulder every time I step out. I don't go back to that cafe late at night anymore, and avoid walking alone whenever I can. It was a chilly October evening, around 8 p.m., when I decided to take a walk through my neighborhood. I needed to clear my head after a long week of work and a recent breakup. The leaves crunched beneath my feet as I strolled through the dimly lit streets, the fading light casting long shadows that danced eerily around me. As I turned a corner, I noticed a figure by the bus stop. He was tall and thin, dressed in a dark hooded jacket. It was odd for anyone to be waiting for a bus at this hour. The last one had left an hour ago. My instinct urged me to cross the street, but I was too tired to care. I kept my eyes focused ahead, trying to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. "Hey," he called out, his voice slicing through the silence. I glanced over, but kept walking. "Where are you headed?" he asked, stepping closer. His breath fogged in the cold air, sending a chill through me. "Just out for a walk," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. I quickened my pace, my heart racing. The streetlights flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow that felt foreboding. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, now just a few steps behind me. My instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't bring myself to look back. Instead, I picked up my pace, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet. I really need to get going," I said, struggling to keep my tone light. "It's late." He chuckled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "What's the rush? It's a nice night out, just you and me." That was when I knew I was in real trouble. I had to think fast. The street was empty, and I realized I had passed the last intersection where I could turn off. I glanced back, and he was still following me, his eyes gleaming in the low light. "Look, I don't want any trouble," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "I really need to get home." "Home's not far, is it?" he replied, his tone unsettlingly nonchalant. "Why don't you let me walk you there?" An icy dread washed over me. I needed to get somewhere crowded. I spotted a convenience store a few blocks ahead and made for it, as if it were my only lifeline. I could hear his footsteps quickening behind me, panic rising in my throat. "Hey, wait up!" he shouted, his voice dripping with mockery. Once I reached the store, I pushed through the door, the bell jingling obnoxiously. I looked over my shoulder. He had stopped a few feet away, watching me with a predatory gaze. I rushed to the back, my heart pounding. The clerk, a wary-looking man in his 50s, glanced at me with concern. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my fear. "There's a guy outside. He's been following me," I whispered, casting worried glances at the door. I didn't want that creep to see me. The clerk nodded, his face serious. "Stay back here. I'll call the cops." I watched through the glass doors as the man lingered outside, shifting from foot to foot, his expression twisted. I felt adrenaline coursing through my veins, hoping the police would arrive soon. Moments later, sirens pierced the night. When the flashing lights painted the parking lot, the man's demeanor changed. He glanced back at me one last time with a sinister grin before he took off into the shadows. The police arrived and spoke with me and the clerk, but by then there was no sign of him. They took my statement, and I felt relief wash over me, quickly overshadowed by lingering fear. "Just stay safe," one officer advised as they left. "Keep your doors locked." I nodded, but anxiety settled in my chest. As I walked home, every sound felt amplified, and shadows stretched ominously in every direction. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the image of him lurking in the darkness haunting me. I made it home, but the sense of safety I once felt in my neighborhood was shattered. I locked the door behind me, the click echoing in the stillness. Let's not meet again.
I'll never forget that night in late September, when the air turned crisp and the days grew shorter. I was walking home from my shift at the diner, tired and craving the comfort of my tiny apartment. It was just after 10 p.m. and the streets were mostly empty, lit only by flickering streetlights casting long shadows. As I turned the corner onto Maple Street, I noticed a man leaning against a lamppost. He wore a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over his forehead. It was unsettling, but I brushed it off. I focused on my phone screen, scrolling through messages from friends, hoping to alleviate my unease. "Hey there," the man called as I walked past, his voice low but steady. A chill traveled down my spine. I quickened my pace, pretending I hadn't heard him. "Wait up," he shouted, his tone shifting from casual to demanding. I glanced back, and his eyes locked onto mine, an unsettling mix of curiosity and something darker. The way he stared felt predatory, as though he was sizing me up. I didn't know what to do. I was 4 blocks from home, and the thought of running felt like being prey. Instead, I kept walking, trying to blend into the night. But he followed, his footsteps echoing behind me. "Why are you rushing?" he taunted, his voice closer now. "I'm not interested," I called out, forcing my voice to sound steady. I picked up my pace, glancing around for anyone who might help me. But the streets were desolate, shadows deepening. "Come on, don't be like that. I just want to get to know you," he said, irritation lacing his tone. The desperation in his voice sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I spotted a convenience store up ahead, its neon sign flickering weakly. Heart racing, I veered toward it, my mind racing with thoughts of what I could do inside. As I reached the door, I pushed it open and slipped inside, the little bell above ringing. The man stopped at the entrance, leaning against the doorframe, a smirk creeping across his face. "You think you can hide in there? You're just delaying the inevitable." The cashier, an older man with tired eyes, looked up. Everything okay?" he asked, glancing nervously between me and the man outside. "Yeah, just, a little lost," I stammered, trying to sound casual but failing. The man outside chuckled, a sound that sent a shivers down my spine. "You think she's lost? She just doesn't want to talk to me." I could see the cashier's eyes widen, and he stepped back, unsure of what to do. "Maybe you should just go," he said, low and shaky,
"Mind your own business," he snapped, and I felt the tension build in the air. My heart raced as I watched him shift his weight, like a predator preparing to pounce. "Just call the police," I whispered to the cashier, my voice trembling. The cashier hesitated, but then nodded slightly, reaching for the phone. The move seemed to provoke the man outside. He pushed off the door frame, stepping closer, his eyes dark and dangerous. "You think you can get away that easily?" he sneered. I felt a surge of panic. "I need to go," I said, my voice shaking. "Not yet," he replied, taking another step forward. The space around me felt like a trap. Suddenly, the cashier managed to dial 911 and began speaking rapidly, his eyes darting between us. The man outside must have sensed it too, his face twisted in anger. "This isn't over," he spat, taking a last look at me before storming off into the dark. I stood there trembling as the cashier locked the door. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I nodded, though my heart raced with the knowledge that I had just escaped something terrifying. The police arrived a few minutes later, and I recounted what had happened, but the man was long gone. Eventually, I left the store, clutching my bag tightly, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds as I made my way home. The feeling of being pursued lingered long after I reached my apartment door, and as I locked it behind me, a wave of relief washed over me. But the fear didn't fade. It clung to me like a shadow, a reminder that danger can lurk in the most mundane places. I still take longer routes home, always keeping my head on a swivel, forever wary of the world outside. Let's not meet again.